Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe. Chronicles of a Gooner. Harry Symeou time. Arsenal. Come on, you Gunners. Arsenal. Chronicles of a Gooner.
Hey everybody, happy Monday and welcome back to another episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast with me, your host, Harry Symeou. Hope you've all had a wonderful weekend. Hope you're all good and ready for this long-ass international break that is unfortunately going to drag, isn't it? And the problem with this particular international break is that we're going into it off the back of a somewhat disappointing result. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I don't think the result up at Sunderland that we managed to sort of achieve on Saturday is something that we should overblow or that we should make too much of a big deal of, because I think when you look back at the game, first half we weren't at it. Sunderland were the better side. Sunderland were able to limit us. Sunderland were able to stop us playing our game. After halftime, we figured it out and we played with a much higher level of intensity, and we were able to completely dominate them to the point where we turned the game on its head. We're 2-1 up going into stoppage time, and we end up conceding an equaliser very, very late on. And it was a rare bit of bad Arsenal defending. And that's not something that we've seen too often, but these things happen. We were never going to win every single match and basically march to the title completely unchallenged. Now, yes, over the course of the weekend, our lead at the top of the Premier League table has been reduced. And that is going to set some alarm bells ringing. That is going to lead to some people panicking. And I have to say, off the back of Saturday's game, when we recorded the reaction pod on Sunday morning, I was disappointed. I was frustrated because I felt that there was no real excuse. I know that you can talk about sort of how difficult the game was overall, the energy levels that we had to put into it to turn it around, the fact that we'd gone to Prague in midweek and played this really physically demanding Champions League game. And it was even raised in the comments, and we were discussing it, weren't we, on the show yesterday, with regards to whether or not Mikel Arteta might have rotated a little bit more in Prague with a view to being fresher and sharper for this game. And maybe if he had done that, it would have looked a little bit different on Saturday. But these are all things that it's quite easy to kind of come up with and throw into the conversation with the benefit of hindsight. We went to Prague, we won convincingly, put ourselves in an even better position in the Champions League. I did say going into Prague that if there was one game that I was willing to take a slightly lesser Arsenal in, that was the one. So, I'm not being revisionist here when I say that. That was my opinion at the time. But I don't think it was Arteta's team selection that let us down on Saturday. I think at the end of the day, it was just a step too far in terms of that physical level that was required. And so if you go back to yesterday's pod and you have a listen to it, when the reaction is obviously a lot rawer and a lot more maybe, or a lot less, I should say, considered, because I haven't had as much time to process, I haven't had another sleep on it and all the rest of it, I would have told you that, he could have maybe brought on some fresh legs a little bit earlier, and maybe that stopped Sunderland building ahead of steam, and that stopped Sunderland having some of the chances that they did late on in the game, and then that stopped Sunderland going on and scoring what was the equaliser. The equaliser was a mess. It was a mess as far as Gabriel was concerned. It was a mess in terms of dealing with the first ball. It was a mess in terms of what David Raya was doing. But how hard can you stick the boot in on players that have been basically flawless up until this point? And that's the thing I'll always come back to. I think when you're reacting to a result like that, it's very easy to let your kind of frustrations get the better of you and to get carried away. But if you zoom out and you look at the bigger picture looks good. If you had said to me at the start of the season, when Liverpool had gone and spent north of £400 million and brought in all these players like Isak, Ekitike, Wirtz, Frimpong, all the rest of them, if you had said to me at that stage that we'd be sitting where we are, 4 points clear of Manchester City, but, you know, a whopping, what is it? How many is it now? 8 points clear of Liverpool, I'd have bitten your hand off. I'd have absolutely taken that. Momentum is a big thing in football. And I know that people will say, well, look, Manchester City have just gone and thumped Liverpool and they've managed to reduce our lead down to just 4 points and they're hot on our heels. Yeah, fine. Okay. And because Manchester City have the history of going and winning the Premier League, they have the manager that's been there and done it. And I thought their recruitment was very good as well. And I know that, you know, I was laughed at actually. You know, I'm going to put it out there. When I was on TalkSport, you know, sort of right at the start of the season, when I've been on TalkSport regularly throughout the campaign so far, I've never discounted City. And often I've been told, you're crazy. What is it that you see in Manchester City? You know what I see in Manchester City? A group of very talented players, a top manager, probably the best in the world. In fact, definitely the best in the world. And Erling Haaland. That's what Manchester City have. But we can talk about momentum and we can say that the momentum's gone their way now and all the rest of it. No, it hasn't. They're still 4 points behind us. Now, I'm not writing them off. I just think the panic that we are seeing is just a little bit premature. It's a little bit premature. If I share with you guys, right, the Premier League table. Let me just do that now. Hold on a second. Let's bring it up on the screens for those of you watching. If you're listening on audio, don't worry. I'll read out all the necessary information. So if you have a look at the Premier League table, Arsenal obviously sit top of the pile with 26 points. Okay. Manchester City are in second with 22 points. But the reason I wanted to show you this particular table, the one on the BBC Sport website, is because right at the end, if you scroll along to the right, you get the form guide. Okay, you get the form guide. And look at Arsenal's form. Win, 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 draw. We've won 5 out of our last 6, and we've drawn 1. Manchester City have also won 5, but they've lost 1. We didn't lose at the weekend. If we had lost, I think that you start to look at it a little bit differently. But the fact that we got out of there with a draw and that we feel so disappointed and underwhelmed by the fact that we got a draw, it actually speaks to the fact that the standard is so high at Arsenal right now that you drop a couple of points at a tricky place to go. I mean, Sunderland are 4th in the league. Make no bones about how good they've been at the start of the season. You drop a couple of points at a place like that, and everybody goes into meltdown. Everybody goes into meltdown. Why? Why? Did you think that Arsenal were going to win every single game between now and the end of the season? Was never going to happen. That's why this league is the hardest league in the world to win, because there is competition all throughout it. And so we can go over the kind of the nuts and bolts of what happened on Saturday, and we did that on Sunday's pod. So I don't want to sit here and sort of highlight the same issues or the same points. If you want to get my match reaction and you want to have a bit of a listen to something that's a little bit more match focused rather than sort of this bigger picture conversation that we're having today, go back on the feed. It is the last episode on the feed if you're an audio listener, and if you're on YouTube, it's the last video that we published. So go and check it out, because I think that, yes, what's happened is a negative in terms of our lead being reduced. But I also think there have been weeks so far this season where we didn't think that we would make up extra sort of ground and sort of create a buffer. And it happened. It went our way. Well, it's not going to go our way every time. You're not going to feel like you've hit the jackpot, like you've won the lottery every single week. Not in a title race in this league, and not when you've got teams of this quality seeking to hunt you down and to chase you down. What happened yesterday at the Etihad was interesting for me, because I sort of went into the game thinking a draw is the best outcome. It means that our lead over City isn't reduced. It remains at 6 points, and it would have meant that we'd have stayed 7 points clear of Liverpool as well. In the end, what's happened is that Liverpool have been beaten, so our lead over them is now 8 points, and Manchester City, having won, have reduced our lead down to just 4. Some people think that actually it's better that City are the ones who are hot on our heels, because City are quite vulnerable defensively. I had lots of responses to a post that I put out yesterday from people saying, yeah, but you know what? It could have gone very different that game. You know, Liverpool had their chances, etc., etc. I don't feel that way. I don't feel that way. I feel like it's always been a 3-horse race. You could argue that yesterday it became a 2-horse race, but Liverpool are not the second horse. Manchester City are. Because like Liverpool, they have the know-how, they have the experience. Unlike Liverpool, they've got a goal scorer like Erling Haaland who is just ripping it up. And Liverpool just look all over the place to me. They look all over the place. Defensively, they're a shadow of their former selves. I always said, and I've mentioned this before on the pod, so forgive me if it sounds like I'm repeating myself a little bit, but I've always said that Liverpool's success this year was going to be defined by, or was going to be reliant upon whether or not Mo Salah and Virgil van Dijk could replicate the level of performance that they showed in the season prior. And do you know what? None of them are anywhere near it. Mo Salah is a shadow of himself. Virgil van Dijk looks all over the place. I mean, you know, there was a bit of controversy around the goal that he scored yesterday that was chalked off. For what it's worth, I think it was right that goal was chalked off because Robertson was in a position that for me was just too close to the goalkeeper for you to categorically deny that he's had any sort of you know, influence or impact on the goalkeeper's ability to make a save. But then you see the Nico Gonzalez goal, the shot, which was a P-roller, really. And there's Virgil van Dijk, who's got enough distance between himself and the ball to see it coming. And he just got to block it. He's got to block it. And he sort of like tries to get out of the way. He sort of half-arses it, and it ends up deflecting off of him and beating Marmadashvili in the goal. And I think to myself, watching it back, I think what Virgil van Dijk's tried to do is pull out of making a block because he sees that the shot isn't one that's going to trouble the goalkeeper and he doesn't want to risk deflecting it one way or the other and causing a problem. But I think when it's that close to you and you've got the time to adjust, I think as a centre-back, at all costs, you've got to stop it going towards your goal. And I think you've got to reach out and block it. And there's no excuse for him getting that horribly, horribly wrong. Look, I think going into this weekend, and I said it many, many times in the build-up to Saturday's game, we just had to get through it. We just had to get through it. We're down to our bare bones when it comes to attacking players. And I don't care what people say about our squad and our strength in depth and all the rest of it. It doesn't matter how much strength in depth that you've got. If you've got 6, 7 important attacking players missing, you're going to be affected by that. We've gone and scored 2 goals away from home, despite those issues and despite those troubles. In the end, we haven't been able to show that same defensive solidity that we have all season so far to kind of get us through. And we weren't able to lean on that particular strength on that given occasion. But there is no need to panic because I think this Arsenal team is different. I think this Arsenal team is resilient. It's robust. It's tough. It's strong. It's got the scars from some very, very taxing recent campaigns. And I feel like we're in a place now where this sort of thing is something that we can bounce back from. And I say bounce back as if we were beaten. We weren't. We've dropped points for the first time in an absolute age. In an absolute age. You know, we'd won 10 games on the trot in all competitions. And so I use that stat and I say it, and I know it's all competitions because I think that line alone kind of highlights some of the overreaction to what happened at the weekend. Yes, of course, if you're Man City and you reduce the deficit and you've got Arsenal to come at the Etihad later on in the season, you're sitting there and you're rubbing your hands together and you're saying it's on. Oh, yes, it's on. It's always been on. That's the point. It was never off. This was always going to be a title race involving multiple teams. It was never going to be the procession to the Premier League crown that some people, not Arsenal fans, mainly people in the kind of wider footballing world, were suggesting it would be. That was disrespectful to Manchester City, and it was disrespectful to Liverpool as well. And I think you can make the case now that Liverpool have fallen too far behind. I mean, I was looking at, I talked about the form bit and highlighting that when it comes to the table, just to show people. But look at this. Liverpool in 8th place. Loss, 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 win, loss. That's why they are where they are. Whether you think mathematically they're out of it or not is another story. I would argue that just 11 games into the season, being 8 points behind, it doesn't mean that you're definitely 100% out of it, but it's their performances that are causing people to feel and to say that actually they don't have what it takes, and they're spent as a force in this title race. You know, can you imagine telling a Liverpool supporter at the start of the season that Manchester United would be above you, that Tottenham would be above you, that Sunderland would be above you, and that Aston Villa, with Unai Emery, who looked like he was up against the ropes right at the start of the season, would be sitting above you? Nah, you couldn't have imagined the drop-off and the fall-off that we've seen from Liverpool so far. At the moment, it is a two-horse race. I do believe that. With Manchester City hot on our heels, I suppose it gives us something to focus on. Because there is a danger when we get too far in front that you can take your foot off the gas, that you can go early in terms of believing that it's going to be your year. And I'm not saying that Mikel Arteta would allow complacency to creep in within the camp, but having someone within touching distance of you, I think it can focus you. And I've got no reason to believe at this stage that this Arsenal team are going to crumble. And there'll be people out there throwing mud at us and saying we're going to crumble, we're going to fall apart and all the rest of it, because that's what people do when it comes to Arsenal. You know, they like to talk us down. I've seen enough so far this season to believe that this team has got the resilience and has got the fortitude to continue in the same vein, to bounce back after the international break with a big game against Spurs. And we go again. We go again. And so, yeah, let's not massively overreact, I guess is my message on today's pod. We've got a Patreon pod coming to you in a little bit. I was hoping to get it done last night. I sort of set aside some time to sit down and do it, but unfortunately, so apologies to the patrons, but you will get that episode today. My little girl was not too well. Those of you that are parents, I'm sure, can understand. And basically, she normally goes upstairs and goes to bed, and I normally take her upstairs, tuck her in, whatever, and I come back downstairs. But she wasn't having it. I had to sit in her bedroom for a good hour and a half, just waiting for her to fall asleep. Oh man, it was an arduous task, but it is what it is, right? You got to do it. So yeah, so that's why the Patreon pod is a little bit late, but I promise you it'll be out with you very, very shortly, because I'm going to record it straight after this. Right, let's reflect, shall we, on some of the weekend's other results. But first, we'll take a few of your comments from the live chat. And of course, I just want to remind you guys that if you haven't done so already, please leave a like on the video. If you're with us on YouTube, that's really, really helpful. Make sure you leave those hype points, whatever they're called, as well. That also really does help. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And if you're listening to us on Apple, Spotify, or any of the audio platforms, please do leave us a review as well. All of that stuff really, really does help. Okay, let's go into the comment section. Big good morning to everyone that's watching live right now, or to those who, of course, are watching this back a little bit later on as well. Really appreciate you being here and your support. Theo says, it's definitely a time to panic. We all know how this story ends. Well, no, you don't know how this story ends, because Arsenal have never had this level of depth and quality. Like, they haven't. You know, and what highlights that, I think, better than anything else, is the fact that we are in this position despite having all the problems that we've had. Despite having all the issues that we've had this season. No Odegaard, no Saka at points, no Martinelli now, no Madueke, no Havertz, no Jesus, no Gyökeres now. You know, the fact that we've still been able to, looking at that form guide on the Premier League table, win, and literally drop points in one game, and that sparked the meltdown in sort of recent times. It shows you that Arsenal are different. Arsenal are different. Now, I'm not writing off City. I'm not saying that City won't win it, but let me tell you this. For City to come from this position and win it, they're not just going to have to be good. They're going to have to be exceptional, because this Arsenal team are not giving this up without a fight. Tom Harry says, City more vulnerable defensively. City have conceded only 3 goals less than us. Liverpool 12 more than us. Yeah, and I think there's this misconception out there, and that's why I said it. I think there's a misconception about what Manchester City are as a defensive side. Manchester City have conceded just 8 goals. You look at Liverpool, they've conceded 17 goals. So I agree with you. I think that City are the better side defensively. City, in a lot of people's opinion, give you chances, but I think City's ability to retain the ball is so good that you're always going to be limited in your chances. And, I read this really interesting article recently about Pep Guardiola's philosophy, style of play, and all the rest of it. And it talked about why possession is such an important thing to Pep Guardiola. And one of the things it sort of really focused on was this idea that, look, you're not going to be able to prevent every chance. You're not going to be able to always defend impeccably if you're committing bodies forward the way that they do, and if you're taking risks in possession the way that they do. But often you've run the opposition ragged for such a long time that when it comes to getting an opportunity, having a chance to spring a counterattack, often they're too tired to make anything of it. And I thought that was a really, really interesting way of looking at it. Steadfast says, you need to put the foot on the throat of Liverpool because they will go on a run. City will drop points to smaller teams. I don't know. I don't know. Let's keep rolling through the comments section. Stephen says there is no 2-horse race. Man City, once bypassing Arsenal, will just go ahead and extend their leads. There's so much negativity around at this stage. I don't get it. Afsar says that Man City are back though and looking very good. Man City can score goals and we struggle to score goals. That's where I'm concerned. That's where I worry. I think that I'm sort of really sort of hoping that when we get those attacking players back into the fold and available again, our ability to score goals is going to increase. I mean, by default, that should be the case, right? But I certainly think that Manchester City have a greater capacity to score goals. And we've been looking at Arsenal's defense and saying, well, that might be what kind of bridges that gap between where we're at in terms of our ability to go on and win football matches versus Manchester City. They're going top heavy. We're going sort of bottom end heavy in terms of the fact that our defensive capability is going to be the difference maker rather than with them, it being the kind of attacking ability. So listen, I agree with that point. I agree with that statement. Erling Haaland is a machine. We don't have anyone like him. But is there an over-reliance on Erling Haaland? That's where, if I were a City fan, I'd be a little bit concerned about their sort of their attacking football. Like, our defense is a unit, right? And okay, it didn't go well at Sunderland the other day, but generally speaking, we know that we've got the capacity to keep clean sheets. We know that we've got the ability to make it very difficult for opponents, and that's because of the unit. Yeah, there are some standout players in there. When you talk about City's attack and why that might be the difference, you've got to acknowledge that a big chunk of that and a huge sort of proportion of that weight rests on Erling Haaland's shoulders. I think I saw yesterday that the goal that he scored against Liverpool was his 28th for club and country this season. That's crazy, crazy numbers. Crazy numbers. Bill says Liverpool were poor yesterday because Salah didn't track back. The left side of City's attack had a field day. I don't think we would have allowed it. Yeah, listen, there's no doubt that defensively we're very well organized and we're a good side. It just didn't work out in the way that we would have liked the other day. Tom says, what weighting would you put the psychological effect of losing previous titles from a leading position? How can we overcome this PTSD? I think we just got to keep going and keep focusing on ourselves and not worrying about what's going on around us. And that is probably where, we've struggled in previous years. We've got to a place where, we are good enough, and we should really, with every kind of fiber of our being, believe that, and not allow sort of noise from the outside to kind of creep into our thinking, creep into our psyche. We've been gradually building towards this. We've been in the mix for the Premier League title for a number of years now. It's not something that just happened overnight. Like that first season when we were challenging, you could understand the collapse and the capitulation. I would argue that injuries certainly played their part that year, but also mentally, we probably weren't ready. And then the following year, we come back again and we take it to the final day. And okay, we lose out, we miss out. Last season wasn't really a contest. If we're being honest, we fell off way too early, in my opinion, and we allowed Liverpool to crawl towards it in the end when you look at some of their back end of the season results. But we had that focus, didn't we, on the Champions League. This year, you're hoping it's going to be different. I think the PTSD thing, I think that is more of an issue within the fan base than it is within the dressing room. I really do believe that. Yeah, I think we've got a responsibility as fans not to make too much of it, because if you do, I think that does translate across. And I know they're pros and they're in their own environment and they're in their own bubble, but I've had it said to me by Arsenal players that they do see our content. They do see what goes out online. So I think we've got a responsibility not to, not to kind of sanitize our feelings or, keep a lid on them to the point where we're being dishonest. But I think we've got a responsibility to analyze things properly rather than being knee jerk all the time and reacting too big. Like, I mean, there'll be people that last week were telling you Arsenal were going to win the title and we're in a great place, that this week will tell you it's all gone and it's all done. And those people who can flip from one end of the spectrum to the other within the space of 90 minutes, I would argue that's probably not an accurate measure of kind of where we're at. So, yeah, I think you've got to stay level-headed, and I think that's what they'll be seeking to do within the walls of Colney as well, as the weeks pass by. Good opportunity to reset. I read an article yesterday. Has the international break come at the right time for Arsenal? I think it has, just in terms of that ability to get players back. There's always a bit of uncertainty when you return from international duty. As a manager, you've got players coming back, having played different amounts of minutes and having had different experiences with different coaches and with different ideas over the course of that period. And so it's not ideal, but this is the last one of the year. So let's get through this. Let's come back. Let's bounce back with a victory over Spurs at home. And we go again. Is the message. Right, let's take a really short pause. And when we come back, we're going to wrap up some of the rest of the Premier League's results, because there were some really interesting ones over the course of the weekend that I want to touch on, that I want to cover off. Short pause and we'll be back. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner.
You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe.
That's right. Like and subscribe if you're with us on YouTube. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please do leave us a review. Let's have a look at some of the rest of the weekend's results then, shall we? Spurs 2, Manchester United 2. Now, I was commentating on this game for BBC Radio London alongside former Manchester United player and England legend Paul Parker. And this was just a really low quality game. Like, I know there was a bit of drama at the end. Tottenham thought they'd won it on 91 minutes when Richarlison diverted Odebear's effort into the far corner. Then De Ligt went down the other end and powered home a header to make it 2-2. There was drama, but the standard was so poor. It reminded me so much of that Europa League final with the two clubs involved not so long ago. And yeah, I can safely say, having covered that game, that neither of those two clubs will be challenging us at the top end of the Premier League table anytime soon. On their day, they both got the players capable to cause you problems, but in terms of the bigger picture, none of them are anywhere near it. Obviously, we've reflected on our game loads, so I don't want to go over that again. West Ham beating Burnley by 3-2. Big result for them. Chelsea comfortably dispatching of Wolves, but who doesn't these days? Rob Edwards is going in there to take over. I'm not sure that's going to be enough for them. And then we move on to Sunday's games. Aston Villa 4, Bournemouth 0. This was not a result that I saw coming. Not that I couldn't see Villa winning, but certainly not by this margin or by this deficit. You've got to give Unai Emery immense credit, because I remember a few weeks into the season looking at Aston Villa and sitting there and thinking, he's up against it. He's on the ropes, and I would be shocked if he was to finish the season in charge of the club. But credit to him, because he's been able to turn it around and he's been able to put them back on the straight and narrow And they are now playing with a confidence, with a belief, and with an energy that I think it looked like had evaded them not so long ago. So credit to Aston Villa and Unai Emery for fixing things and getting back on track. Brentford 3, Newcastle 1. Keith Andrews and Brentford, they just keep picking up points. And, I tipped them to go down at the start of the season because I looked at the situation. They lost Thomas Frank, who was obviously huge in terms of what's been built at Brentford over the years. They lost Norgard. They lost Visser. They were pulled apart, basically, to the point where you wondered if they were going to struggle and if it was going to be just a horrible slide back down to the bottom of the table. And unfortunately for them, filtering down into the Championship come the end of the season. It's not been the case. Keith Andrews, I questioned the appointment. I wasn't sure it was the right appointment. And I think that's only natural when you're looking at someone who doesn't have that managerial experience. But they're playing to their strengths. I think they've scored 9 goals from direct throw-ins so far this season, which is, a classic example of a club understanding who they are, understanding where they're at, and looking to play to those strengths. On the other hand, though, Newcastle United, what has happened there? We've heard so much praise for Eddie Howe over the years, and at times he's done a really good job. You can't deny that. But Newcastle are down in 14th place. And, I work quite closely with a few Newcastle United supporters, and all I've been hearing all season is, well, the performances have been better than the results. Yeah, okay, fine. And when you're going on a 2, 3, 4 game run where things aren't quite going your way, but the performances are encouraging, you can take solace in that. But when it gets to this stage where you're sort of 11 games into the season and the table's finally starting to take a bit of a shape to it now, to be on just 12 points after 11 games, that's just not good enough. To have a goal difference of -3 at this stage, if you're Newcastle United, it's not good enough. The strangest derby in the world, Palace-Brighton, finished 0-0. They're miles away from each other. I don't know how it's a derby, but apparently it is. M23 derby, whatever they call it. Is it the M23? I can't remember. I didn't expect. If you'd have told me to pick one game this weekend that was the least likely to finish 0-0, I'd have probably picked that game. And so, of course, it finished 0-0. Nottingham Forest with a big win under Sean Dyche over Leeds United. And Leeds United, who are on 11 points, only now just a point clear of the drop zone. So they're getting drawn into it. Nottingham Forest closing the gap on Burnley in 17th to just a single point. So signs of a revival there. And then, of course, that game at the Etihad between Manchester City and Liverpool, that finished 3-0 to the Citizens, who are now breathing down our necks. So that's a roundup of the weekend's Premier League action. Have you got any questions? Have you got any thoughts? If you have, chuck them in the live chat and we'll work our way through a few of those before we sign out from today's pod. Don't forget to like, subscribe, all the rest of it. If you're listening on audio, leave us a review. And if you want to go on further, you can check us out on Patreon, patreon.com/the Chronicles of a Gooner. That helps in terms of giving us the ability to spend more time on the pod, to focus more on this show that I love so dearly, that has been so important to me in recent years and continues to be. So, you can support us on Patreon for less than the price of a cup of coffee. You get access to bonus episodes, the next of which will be available to you very shortly after we wrap up this live stream. Of course, you get access to all the general episodes completely ad-free, which I know is a big deal to a lot of people. Plus, you get a direct line into me and all the other patrons, and we have a good old chinwag in there as well. So, looking forward to hearing from you on the Patreon side of things as well. Right, let's take a very, very brief pause once again, and when we come back, we are going to tackle your comments from the live chat, so get involved.
You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe.
That's right. Like and subscribe. Okay, let's take some of your questions. There's some really interesting questions as well. Tom says, Harry, which 3 teams get relegated? I fear for Wolves. I don't think the appointment of Rob Edwards is going to be enough. I think West Ham will have enough to get out of it. I think Leeds could go down, I think Leeds, and I think as much as they've looked quite resilient and done quite well, I think Burnley go down. So right now I'm going Wolves, Burnley, and Leeds. Z's gone for exactly the same teams as me. So there you go. Okay, Guitar Solo says, which 3 injured players do you think we miss the most right now? And who would they come in to replace? Okay, so I think we miss Martin Odegaard a lot, just in terms of our general play. We know he's really, really important in that sense. I know there'll be people that say, well, he hasn't played well for a long time and all the rest of it. But I just think he's one of those people that you don't always understand his importance until he's gone, until he's out of the picture. And I think we're really seeing that now. So Odegaard will come in and he'd play instead of Eze in the midfield for me. I don't think Eze is doing enough at the minute. It's not to say he won't do enough or that it was a bad signing or anything like that. I'm not being that knee-jerk. I just don't think right now he's in the greatest form. So Odegaard, I think Gyökeres we're missing. And I know it's not been many games without him, but he just brings a different dynamic to our attack. So he would replace Marino in the side that, of course, played at the weekend. And the other one for me, I'm going to say is Martinelli. And I think Martinelli, in his current form, Martinelli, who, has rediscovered that confidence, is a really, really important player to us. And you've asked me who they come in to replace. I wouldn't start him ahead of Leandro Trossard, by the way, right now, who I think is playing really, really well. But I think having that Martinelli option is massive. For certain games, like, for example, once Trossard scored that goal the other day, okay, and obviously he was full of confidence and whatever. And this is not to criticize Trossard because he did work back and he did work really hard. And there was a bit in the game, I don't know if I mentioned this actually on the post-match pod that we did, where Trossard was sort of pictured screaming 15 minutes focus and doing all this and gesticulating to his teammates. And I thought, never had you down as much of a leader, but you know what? You want this just as much as everyone else. I just wonder if you brought Martinelli on at that stage, just to give you not just fresh legs in terms of his ability to cover ground and get back, but also in terms of having that outlet where you could go a bit more direct, you could go a bit longer. When your backs were against the wall, rather than going up to sort of Marino and hoping for him to win a header or bring it down, you could just hit it into the spaces, into the channels, and send Gabriel Martinelli on his merry way to try and get on the end of those things and run people into corners and all the rest of it. So I think Odegaard, Gyökeres, and Martinelli are the ones we miss most. We miss Kai Havertz badly as well, just because he's a Swiss Army knife for me and he could do so many different things. But Martinelli's form of late has me putting him ahead because we've been without Havertz for such a while, and we've coped. We've coped. I've been asked this question about who makes our best front three many, many times recently. On current form, Gyökeres through the middle, Saka right, and Trossard left is what I would be picking. But obviously, those backup options make a difference because you can rotate, from the start of games, but you can also change things and attack in different ways by sort of altering things from the bench. But without those players available, it's difficult to do that, isn't it? Tom says that Trossard has stepped up big time. Got to give him his flowers, yeah. Guitar Solo says, why is City seen as free scoring when they're 3 goals ahead? I know our style of play is more laborious than City's, but we are scoring goals. Yeah, we are scoring goals. I suppose it's one of those sort of common misconceptions that you see. And I think I'd be interested, because I don't know the number off the top of my head, how many of their goals have come from open play versus how many of our goals have come from open play. And I think I'd imagine, and I don't know the number for sure, but off the top of my head, I'd imagine that they've scored significantly more from open play than us, which leads to people sort of then categorizing them and labeling them in a different way to us. So I think that's probably quite important in the conversation here. Damien says, what do you think of this midfield? Eze, Odegaard, and Zubimendi, would they get bullied? Absolutely. Absolutely. I don't think, you can leave Declan Rice on his current form out of the team. And B, I think, that's a midfield for, a Carabao Cup game, or when you are chasing a goal, desperate for a goal, and want to throw more attacking spark and creativity on. Because listen, all 3 of those players you've mentioned, Eze, Odegaard, and Zubimendi, they could play a killer pass. They could score a goal. Declan Rice can score a goal, can deliver a set piece. I don't think he's got that same vision as those three guys that you've mentioned there. But at the same time, it gives you so much else. I don't think you can leave Rice out of the team right now. I'm sorry. And I don't think Zubimendi copes as well without Rice. So I think it's an ecosystem whereby they're all reliant upon each other in some way or another. So I don't think that midfield has the balance required. Big shout out to Wilson, who says, do you think it is wise for us not to panic regarding this weekend's results? Yeah, absolutely. I know you've joined the stream late, but that's what we were talking about right at the top of it. Do we, how are we feeling? And it's okay to feel a little bit anxious because of the experiences that we've lived, 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 that we've lived. Okay, I should be back. Can you see me? I don't know what happened there. It just sort of glitched. Is Harry on a loop? I don't know what happened there. Can you hear me? Am I back now? Yeah, there was a glitch somehow. Something to do with the software. Great. I'm going to have to... I don't know if I'm back. I don't know if I'm not back. Anyway, I'm just going to talk as if I'm back. Good track, says Steadfast Godcast. Was it doing one of those things then? Yeah, I just refreshed the page. I don't know what happened there. Anyway, yeah, that's it for today's episode. At least it glitched at the end rather than a little bit later on. Nice freestyler, says Illusion. Right, I will see you all soon. Until the next time, take care of yourselves and have a wonderful, wonderful day. Patron piece coming within the next 20 minutes or so. So look out for that if you're a patron, and I'll speak to you all soon. Goodbye.
Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe. Chronicles of a Gooner. Harry Symeou time. Arsenal. Come on, you Gunners. Arsenal. Chronicles of a Gooner.